Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. If you're new here, welcome. This is Simply Social Work. Last week I talked about COVID fatigue and outlined some coping strategies to help you get through this crazy year. If you missed that video, I'll link it in the description box below. Today I'm going to be addressing some myths surrounding the profession of social work and hopefully clearing up some misconceptions about what it is we actually do and who we actually are. If you don't know what social work is or don't quite have an understanding of it yet, I recommend going back and watching my first video on my channel, which was called What is Social Work, where I gave an overview on the profession and what we do. I'll link that video in the description box as well. Let's get started. First up, social workers take children away from their families. As I mentioned in my first video, not all social workers work in child protective services. Social workers can and do work in many other fields, such as healthcare, mental health, employment, education, legal, accessibility, and advocacy. Social workers can work in hospitals, prisons, grassroots organizations, and private practices, just to name only a few. For those that do work in child protective services, the goal of those organizations is not to just apprehend kids. The point of child protective services is actually to ensure that children are living in a safe, secure environment. In most cases, this means working with the family and doing everything that they can to improve situations and ensure enough security is in place so children can stay with their families. They're also guided by very specific child protection laws that determine if and when a child needs to be removed from the home, as well as what those next steps are. Because this also does not mean that the children will never return to their families. Many do. And as I've said before, this does not mean that the system is perfect. Here in Canada, our system definitely has some structural issues that require addressing. Apprehensions happen that may not need to, or the other way around. Our Children's Aid Society, or CAS, is a private entity that many believe can have way too much authority in people's lives. But just because our system needs revisiting and some work doesn't mean that social workers are just people who are out to take your children away. Most are just trying their best in the system that we have. Myth 2. Social workers must lead perfect lives. I wish. But social workers are human just like any other. There's an assumption that being a social worker means you always have your shit together. The truth is that just like anyone else, we don't always practice what we preach. Many of us struggle with conflicts or communication breakdowns, our mental health, difficulties at work, or struggle financially. This myth actually can lead to many social workers struggling with imposter syndrome, which is the internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. So if you're a practicing social worker or a future one, or even if you're watching this as someone working in a helping profession, your personal struggles do not make you less qualified or fake. In fact, your personal journey is probably a factor in your motivations, empathy, compassion, and what makes you a good worker. Myth 3. It takes a special kind of person to be a social worker. Okay, so this one is one that I personally hear all the time. It's usually a family member or friend saying something along the lines of, "Wow, I couldn't do what you do." And this myth goes hand in hand with the last one because it again puts social workers up on this pedestal. But we're not perfect or superhuman. We make mistakes and run out of patience too. Some days are incredibly difficult emotionally, socially, and even physically. Similar to this myth, many clients view us as the expert who have all the answers to their problems. Social workers are highly skilled and trained professionals, but you are still ultimately the expert of your own life. Our job is to compassionately and empathetically use our skills and resources to facilitate your own solutions. And yes, there are certain personality traits that are important for a social worker to have, but a lot of what we do comes from our education and experiences. And finally, only bad people need a social worker. There's quite a bit to break down with this one. First and foremost, needing the help of a social worker does not mean that you are a bad person. It doesn't mean you're incapable, incompetent, lazy, a bad parent, or in legal danger. It's not a moral judgment on you or your life or your situation. It might simply mean that you need a little extra support for a while. Like I've said before, social workers are just there to facilitate, connect you to resources, build upon your own strengths, and ultimately support you. Like I've said before, social workers are there to facilitate, connect you to resources, build upon your own strengths, whether it be with your mental health, navigating the medical field, financial difficulties, or even involving your family. Social workers can be a temporary assistance so that you are not struggling alone. The problem with this myth is that many people who could benefit from this extra help don't receive it because there's such a misconception and stigma about what it means or what that might say about them. The other problem with this myth on the other side is that those who do recognize that they need support and actually utilize it are often judged for it. The harsh reality is that even institutions and agencies who are supposed to know better are not always immune to this bias, and it can be challenging to navigate all of these different conflicting ideas. The important thing for anyone watching this, no matter who you are or what your life circumstances might be, is that it is 100% okay to need extra help sometimes. All of us do. Cut yourself some slack, give that person a break. You have no idea what's happening in their life or what they've already tried to do to help themselves. And so that's just 4 of the common myths and misconceptions that are floating around about who we are and what it is we do as social workers. As you saw, that can be both positive or negative, and both come with their own set of challenges and consequences. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. Let me know in the comments what myths you've heard or have even thought of yourself. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you don't miss a single one of my videos. I post here each and every week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. I'll link that box in the medical sector. I am tongue twisting today.